Welcome to Brainstorm 9000.
Are you lonesome tonight? Do you miss me tonight? Are you sorry we're drifting apart?
Hello, brains of the internet. Usually this phrase would be pronounced by our famous Master McMaster. But now I have to say it. Hello, internet. Today I'm celebrating the 49th episode of Brainstorm 9000 alone. Hence, I sang together with Elvis this beautiful song. My name is Dr. Schultz, and this is Brainstorm 9000. So, if you haven't heard that Master McMaster left, now you heard, she did leave. Spoiler alert! Again, something Master McMaster would be to tell you. Yes, there is going to be a new host. Keep listening and you'll meet them. I decided to talk about the podcast, to discuss some of our achievements and where this podcast is going, what to expect happening in the future. So the first important idea is clear. We are going to continue. But let's talk first about what has really happened. Why did McMaster leave? I guess those of you who kept listening to our episodes, or maybe I didn't and I'm going to say it right now, is episode number 49 of Brainstorm 9000. We started releasing this episode last year. I think it was something like June 16th or 19th. So in 2 episodes, we are going to hit episode number 50, and I'll try to make it very special for you. So one wonders, why did Master McMaster leave? After all, it's a very interesting podcast, at least to my opinion and probably your opinion, all the brains of the internet, since you keep listening. What happened? Actually, I have to tell you that to the best of my knowledge, there is absolutely no hidden agenda here. As Jane said in a previous episode about ketamine, and if you didn't listen to it, please go back and listen to our episode 48. Jane at the end of the episode just said that she needed some time off to take better care of herself. And please, let me assure you that nothing else happened, at least not to the best of my knowledge. Jane spoke to me about her need to leave so she can spend time taking care of her personal needs. I said, of course. We developed an exit plan, and off she went, on very good terms. Maybe you want to know how I feel about her leaving? Hell, I'm not happy about it at all. I totally share the sentiment with Elvis. But Elvis's song is romantic. There was no romance on this podcast. Jane worked for me at my office, was responsible for media, and one of the parts that she was responsible for was doing this podcast with me. But you know, just today one of my friends sent me the following thought. I quote, 100% of people who sat on a porcupine feel sorry for their own ass, but none feel sorry for the porcupine. It would be probably very funny if I was talking about somebody else, but actually, of course, I do hurt. It took a while to find such an amazing, outstanding, charismatic person as Master McMaster is. Jane was instrumental in making this project work. In case you didn't know, the website for the podcast was created and maintained by her only. That work that you see on YouTube every time you listen to yet another episode was also her creation. The artwork for the last 2 episodes was created by someone else, and the artwork for this episode and going forward is also going to be different. There are going to be many changes coming, and no spoiler alert here. Jane also did research for some of the episodes, but most importantly, she was Master McMaster, a philosopher, the devil's advocate, who had an amazing radio voice and a very charismatic personality. I'm talking about her as if she is in the past, but of course, to the best of my knowledge, she does exist and happily going on about her life. So maybe I should talk about history. I mean, how did I meet Master McMaster? But before I do, I have to share with you the following. It's absolutely common for people to change jobs, and of course, I'm pretty sure you guys know about it as well as I do. And it's also pretty common for people who spend so much time together with a person working on a very exciting project to feel kind of lonely. So if you are lonely, you are not alone. An American Psychological Association study, for example, found that lonely people are at a greater risk for premature death. So I hope it's not going to happen to me, although I'm in my very ripe 60s. I'm going to turn 64 in October. I still feel pretty good. I just knocked on wood, of course. In a recent survey of 20,000 US adults, it was found that nearly half of people suffer from feeling of loneliness. The evaluation of loneliness was measured by an often used score of 43 or higher on the University of California, Los Angeles so-called Lonliness Scale. Feel free to Google it. It's a 20-item questionnaire that was developed for measuring feelings of loneliness and social isolation. So, are we experiencing a friendship crisis? Are we experiencing a loneliness crisis? Just to remind you, this is an important part of most of the podcasts that we have. Again, probably Master McMaster would be talking about this factual material in her deep voice without this disturbing Russian accent that I have. JK. I think my accent is kind of cute. So experts suggest that loneliness is a health issue as well as a social issue. The so-called Cigna report found, for example, that only around half of Americans, 53%, say they have meaningful daily face-to-face social interactions, including an extended conversation with a friend or spending quality time with their family. Members of Generation Z, yo Z, these are adults, for me in big quotes, sorry. Adults aged 18 to 22, for the purposes of the study I'm quoting, said they are the loneliest generation and claim to be in worse health than older generations. Actually, to me, a 63 years old guy, it came as a total surprise, I must tell you. Social media use alone is not a predictor of loneliness, actually. We spoke about it on many occasions in many of our episodes. But it turns out that heavy users have a loneliness score of 43.5. That is only slightly higher than people who say they never use social media, who have a score of 41.7. So, what is behind this loneliness in America? Let's talk about some theories. And again, when I say it, I can clearly envision Master McMaster talking about, in quotes, theories. Of course, one of the easiest items to tackle would be for me to tell you from my own experience that as people age, and I'm familiar with this, they lose family members. Both of my parents passed by now. They lose friends. They also frequently cut down on work. Not my case. And that makes them susceptible to loneliness because for people like that, just a chance to have a social interaction decreases. For example, I can tell you, I have two daughters. They're on their own, they're adults, they're in their early 30s. One of them lives very far from me. She lives in California with my grandson and my son-in-law. And the other one lives not that far from me, but she works. So we don't see each other as frequently. 2012 University of California San Francisco study found that people aged 60 years old and older, so that would be like me, who said they felt lonely were 45% more at risk of dying earlier than those who did not feel lonely. So listen, I feel lonely only inside of Brainstorm 9000, and this is going to change, as I told you. They also found, I quote, that mandatory overtime and involuntary long hours are a growing problem, particularly for some segments of labor force. That is according to Overworked America, a 2016 report from Washington Center of Equitable Growth, which is a left-leaning research center. So workers who are not paid overtime are more than twice as likely to report working more than 40 hours a week. Social isolation, as I mentioned before, and social media go hand in hand. Although the previous study that I quoted just a few moments ago says that it's not necessarily the case, but the American Journal of Preventive Medicine in 2017 study, which was done on more than 1,700 people, said that it is the case that social isolation and social media are related, meaning people who overuse social media are lonely people. Also, we know that more Americans are turning to prescription drugs, and not only to prescription drugs, also to drugs, and that kind of isolates people. According to one of the studies, over 70% of US employers are dealing with the direct impact of prescription drug misuse on workplaces. The percentage of people who test for illicit drugs also went significantly up. It's more than 9.5 million people that were tested and tested positive. Generation Xers, hello people, hello brains of the internet, have been struggling quite a bit to regain their wealth. So Generation Xers are struggling since the Great Recession, and hence they have significantly less time to spend with their family and friends. I can tell you, forgetting about the rest of the statistics, that in my personal opinion, and my opinion as a person who knows psychology and psychiatry, just the fact alone that it's kind of a tradition now for people to go out on Thursdays and Fridays and sometimes also Saturdays and get necessarily drunk, sometimes with blackouts, is not serving a very good job. Because when you are at the club or with other people, even at the bar, and you are occupied with continuously drinking and kind of, in quotes, having fun, end of quote, you are actually isolating yourself because you are not receiving all the sensory and social input that you could have if you were sober. Just my 55 cents. So, as we see, I'm in a pretty good company, so to speak. But let's look at what happened with Master McMaster. Although formally she didn't change the job, she just left a job to take some time off. Predictably, she'll probably get another job. So how often do people change jobs? Seems to be a pretty naive question. Well, whether it is apparent to you or not, but people no longer work for one company for their whole career, retiring after 50 years with a pension and a gold watch. That is way in the past. And we all know that the raises of your salaries have this tendency to hover around about 3% on average a year. But if you decided to jump to another job, you can get a significant raise. So people do that just for this simple reason. Also, sometimes employers discharge employees more rapidly than in the past when business conditions change or productivity lags. And let's not forget that AI and the robots are slowly but surely, and maybe not so slowly, but definitely surely, taking over the world. So a lot of positions have been taken over by automated systems and artificial intelligence. While for some people an internal transfer may be considered a change, it's not going to be accompanied by an increase in salary. And some promotions internally, I have to tell you, and I hear it all the time from my clients, although come with a very impressive title, very frequently bring more work and significantly less pay. So if we stop talking about unclear things, I have to tell you that according to statistics, an average person nowadays changes jobs an average of 12 times during his or her career. Many workers spend just 5 years or less in every job. In January 2018, the Bureau of Labor Statistics reported the median employee tenure was 4.3 years for men and 4.0 years for women. Well, Master McMaster worked for me for almost exactly a year, so she is not in the statistics. So, because job changes became a pretty common event in people's life, it's also more important nowadays to participate in kind of aggressive job searching and networking. The successful worker is one who is up to date on trends in their industry, that practiced interviewing techniques so he can get a better job. What about gender and age factors? The Bureau of Labor Statistics reports that people born between 57 and 64 held an average of 11.9 jobs from ages 18 to 50. Of course, the statistics has changed. Nowadays, average duration of jobs for people from age 25 to 34, as the Bureau of Labor Statistics calls it, a tenure, median tenure, is 2.8 years. From ages 35 to 44, it's 4.9 years, and from 44 to 54, it's 7.6. What are usually the reasons for changing a job? Of course, higher pay, better benefits and perks, relocation, career advancement, choosing a less stressful job, escaping from an incompetent or negative boss. Of course, that was not a reason for Master McMaster to leave. A changing career focus, that could be a case with anybody, including Master McMaster. Better work-life balance. Bingo! That's why she left. Reorganization at their company, layoffs, more interesting work, better work schedule, and so on and so on and so on. So apparently, after we reviewed all these statistics together, not only it's not that uncommon for people to leave a job, but apparently, and I'll say it again and again, Master McMaster did it for a pretty good reason. So coming back to me grieving her departure, and although probably you think I'm trying to be funny here, but I'm actually pretty serious. For me, it's a big loss. And one of the ways to deal with it is for me to talk to you. So you, ingenious brains of the internet, are helping me right now to deal with the loss. So let's go back to history. And after all, I mean, how did I meet Master McMaster? Actually, maybe I never spoke about it to you guys, and I'm not sure that Master McMaster and I brought it up at any point in our podcast together. I started the podcast with another person. We did quite a few interviews together. For example, if you had a chance to listen to Dr. Gallenker's and Dr. Perkel interview, you might remember them from episodes about suicidality, and Dr. Perkel also spoke about drug addiction. They were interviewed by me together with this other person, and then a few recordings later, when we were just figuring out how to record and were only thinking about releasing, we knew that we have to first record, edit, and assemble a number of episodes so we can release them on a regular basis. So I'm letting you in on the inner works of our podcast and most likely all other podcasts. So routinely a podcast is recorded, and then someone like Master McMaster in our case would go through the recording, record some edits and send it together with edits to an editor. No kidding. The title is The Editor, who then finishes up the podcast, make sure that it sounds okay, and attaches to the beginning the intro and to the end the outro. And it always has some music. So after a few more recordings, Jane McMaster came along to talk about philosophy. And she was simply amazing, thoughtful, articulate, with an amazing radio personality and radio voice. I have to tell you that everyone who is smart has a benefit, but not everyone who is smart and well-spoken makes a good impression on the radio. And similarly, I learned it from the pros, a video or a movie camera doesn't necessarily like or love all good-looking people that we meet in our daily life. And they don't necessarily dislike all the non-so-good-looking people. And you can tell from watching movies, not all the even super famous actors are good looking, with quite a few exceptions, of course, but they all have the movie charisma, so to speak. By the way, I have to tell you that the philosophy episode that aired in this podcast was re-recorded later after Jane took the spot of that other person and assumed the radio personality of Master McMaster. But let's go back a little bit more. Before Jane came on board, I recorded a few more episodes and actually hired an editor to help to make the episodes work. I mean, as I told you, each episode has an intro, an outro, has to have music. During that time, the first co-host quite suddenly left, and I was facing a situation when I had a bunch of episodes recorded, but no co-host and no elements that I just mentioned that are required to produce an interesting podcast. And I can tell you, I'm acutely aware of my pretty thick Russian accent. I'm also not a spring chicken. It doesn't matter how I feel on the inside, but I'm a 63 years old Russian psychiatrist. So I felt that for me, to be quite honest with you, to reach the audience that I'm interested in, which are the millennials and whoever else comes next and whatever else they call themselves, I needed a co-host who was younger and hopefully didn't have an accent. It could be that I'm biased, but if I'm biased against myself, so it's okay. You don't need to defend me in front of me. So I kept listening to the recorded material because I had to make the notes for the editor to edit them, and I realized that Jane actually could save the day if I called her. So I reached out and we met in a little cafe one of the mornings in New York, and she agreed to be a co-host. The name for the podcast was created during our first recording session that we actually had in a real professional recording studio. As we both expected, chemistry on there was pretty good. Recording went very smoothly and easy, and after the first few recording sessions, Jane came up with the name Master McMaster. She told me, look, I'm going to call you Dr. Schultz. So you are a real, because you are a real doctor. But what about me? I thought I have master's degree in philosophy, so maybe we could call me Master McMaster. I immediately loved the name and actually started convincing her that she should definitely take on this name, and probably 1 or 2 episodes later she agreed. What about the name of the podcast? Actually, initially we wanted to call the podcast simply Brainstorm, but the name, as it turned out, was already taken. Then we decided that we want to call it Brainstorm 3000, just simply because there is a famous, very cool artist called 3000. Brainstorm 3000 seemed to just roll off the tongue. But luckily to me, because for me to say Brainstorm 3000 is kind of difficult, it also wasn't available. So we went with 9000. Why? I don't know. Just came to my mind to suggest it because it was very far from 3000, and I personally didn't think that somebody came that high with numbers to occupy this spot, and I was right. So now it's Brainstorm 9000, and welcome all the brains of the internet. And off we went. By now, today, we also have social meets where we regularly tweet and instantly gram and Facebook. Guess what? I just came up with these jokes myself. I hope they're funny. So, what is going to happen next? But wait just a minute. Don't we have a huge elephant standing in the middle of the studio? This elephant is called Jane is not here anymore. So yes, as I mentioned 5,000 times, it's kind of upsetting, but life must go on. And Brainstorm 9000 has a very important mission. If you haven't seen one of my favorite movies, also happens to be one of the favorite movies of Master McMaster, The Blues Brothers, the original one, although you can see the second one, the quote from there is this: "We are on a mission." And then they go on to say, "We are on a mission from God." So I'm on a mission, but I'm on a mission from our brains. The reason that I started the podcast and then continued it so successfully with Master McMaster is to draw people's attention to a very simple but not so obvious to a lot of people I've spoken to fact. Our brain is our main organ, and we need to take very good care of it. And for that, I feel I and anybody who wants to help me, together with you guys, need to do our best to raise awareness of people in the United States and in the world that they need to start paying attention to their brain on a daily, hourly basis. So please, keep your brains open. Goodbye. Or, as Master McMaster would say, goodbye, Earthlings.
Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Brainstorm 9000. If you like us, love us, or marginally tolerate us, hey, go ahead and subscribe, rate, and give us a review on iTunes or Stitcher or wherever the hell you listen to your podcasts.